Gun shop employees of Reddit, what are some red flags that have caused you to deny a sale of a firearm? Serious. Finally one that I can answer. I was living in Alaska for a year and picked up a part-time job in the winter as a gun counter clerk at a national sporting goods chain. One slow evening a kid comes in, by kid I'm talking college aged, and starts staring into the pistol case. I ask him if he wants to see one and that I'd need his ID to verify his age etc. All's going well. It's obvious he's new to guns. I ask him what his intended purpose and use was in order to find what might suit his needs. He says he wants a cowboy style gun and all he wants to do is to go shooting to let off steam, that his mom teases him for always being on the computer and growing up a bussy. The more I talked to him the more I realized he was just a closet weeaboo slash otaku. My brother's a full-on weeboo, so I told the kid about how they had a big group of friends who met once a year during AX, or Comic Con SD. Kid was straight up starry-eyed, told me he wishes he knew people like that if he had friends like that he wouldn't have bipolar issues. In the end I told the kid not to buy a gun, save up his money and GTFO of Alaska. I swear I've not had a happier customer. Dude didn't even buy anything. We get lots of people who use us for transfers. They buy online and then the gun comes to us and we handle the background check. One guy had done a transfer with us previously and I got a bad feeling about him. Nothing concrete, he just bugged me. A few weeks later, he called again for another transfer. The gun was coming from Alaska, so I told him it was going to take a bit longer than usual and I'd call him as soon as it arrived. The next day, he called wanting to know if I had a tracking number yet. I didn't. The Alaska FFL only did business by mail. How the hell a letter was supposed to get to Alaska overnight, I know not. Again, I told him to be patient. Fast forward a week, and he calls me 3 times. He lets slip that the dealer in Alaska won't talk to him, and he needs me to be the go-between. That's a red flag. Sellers normally communicate with buyers. He was acting really sketchy and impatient, so I had decided to deny the sale. So, I called the dealer, because this was getting sketchy. The dealer told me he cancelled the sale. Interesting, never had that happen before. The dealer said, and I'm quitting here, that guy is a serial killer in the making. He'd harassed the dealer several times a day starting on the day he ordered the gun. The dealer said the guy knew the sale was cancelled because he told him and refunded his money. That settled it for me. I wasn't interested in handling any transfers for him. When I finally blocked his phone number, 2 days after talking to the dealer, I had 35 missed calls from him. TLDR, guy was super impatient about a transfer, harassed the seller, and spooked him pretty badly. Logged 35 missed calls to my phone in 2 days. Paperwork accuracy is a big issue. It has to be 100%. If your gov issued it doesn't match the info you put on a form and you don't have any of the allowed supporting information, then no gun sales to you. Had one guy come in only with the title to his car, no gov issued photo id. He spouted some BS about sovereign citizen blah blah. We took his info and blacklisted him in the computer. We didn't want to be associated with that type of folks. We would also ask what the intended use was for and lead them with a certain hunting season. An example would be, okay, why do you need a .22 rifle, going to hunt some deer? If they would answer yes, no gun. The .22 rifle, while capable to kill a deer, is not allowed in our state's hunting regulations, or any that I know of. Big red flag. We had a protocol that, if we got strange customers, like folks asking for 1 bullet, seemed like they were just trying to get any gun, making threatening statements etc., we would make them fill out their section of the 4473 form, photocopy their id, then deny the sale. This way we could involve law enforcement as needed. If we just told them no, you have nothing else than a sheety description and some security camera footage. The one that really sticks out is the guy who in the course of small talk / feeling out the customer asked if he could walk out with a gun that day. We told him that if the paperwork was acceptable and the background check came back as a proceed, then he would be able to. He follows up with a good, now I can ice my beach of a wife. We had him do the paperwork, copied his id, and denied him right there. He was pissed to say the least. He finally left. We called the cops and they followed up with a wellness check. Turns out he was just a sheethead. Still blacklisted him in the computer. I don't work in a gun shop, but I'm an avid collector and conduct private sales every so often. In my state, there's a couple of modest rules that have to be followed. You can't knowingly transfer to a prohibited person. You can't transfer across state lines. You can't transfer to a minor unless they're a family member, that kind of thing. Due to my state's proximity to Illinois and Chicago, and the relative ease of obtaining a carry license, the carry license has become kind of a stand-in for background checks that private sellers can't do. I ask for a driver's license to show residency, a carry permit to show this person would pass a 4473 background check, if I earn one, then have them fill out a bill of sale basically saying I promise I'm not a prohibited person. Any legit gun enthusiast can breeze through those requirements. People who get cheaty about them set off red flags for me. This one dude super sketched me out, and I took some screen grabs of the conversation. Basically, he was from out of state and tried to cajole me into selling him an AK pattern rifle. After double and triple checking the relevant laws, I told him I wasn't comfortable with a private sale, but I'd be more than happy to go to a dealer and pay the transfer fee. It's legal to transfer to an out-of-state buyer if you do it through a dealer. We'd have met at a gun store and taken 10 minutes to do it. He wasn't happy with that. He sent this random gun collection picture, claiming to already own several machine guns. They weren't, so obviously he can't be a prohibited person. Then he tried the whatever, I'll just buy from someone else move, probably hoping I'd be in a hurry to sell. Never be in a hurry to sell. I bid him on his way. I maintain a no sketch policy for sales. There's always another buyer out there who won't give you shit about basic as covering. A week later, the rifle sold to a completely normal dude with a valid permit who lived in the next county over. I think the guy was just an idiot, not a criminal straw buyer or an aspiring mass shooter. But when someone argues with you about the law and tries to pressure you into a sale, that's a red flag. Edit. Thank you for the gold. I also accept baggies of loose .22 LR, homemade cookies, and socks. Another one. This is when I was pretty new and just a lowly counter person. This pumped up dill hole comes in, glances in a case, and points out a Kimber. For those who don't know, these are rather expressive pistols. This one was in the $2.50 K range. Says he wants it. This is a straw purchase behavior, so I was on watch for strange behavior from him immediately. Upon pulling the gun from the case, I see the tag has been marked. We had a secret way of marking tags of guns someone has looked at. If they demonstrate behavior, that indicates they may send someone in for a straw purchase. I go to the back to grab the gun and tell my manager what's up. He starts to try to figure out why it's marked, seeing if we have any notes, while I go out to start paperwork. I give the guy the spiel. The paperwork needs to be filled out in an extremely precise manner, and he is rolling his eyes at me and making a show of ignoring me, telling me he has his own FFL and knows what he's doing. So he fills out the paperwork, and I start looking it over. Mistakes everywhere. He put USA in the county field, didn't use caps in the state field, scribbled out mistakes without dating and initialing, checked a box that doesn't need to be checked unless you're an alien. I made him fix all of those things, and he kept telling me I'm stupid and don't know what I'm talking about, and he did it perfectly, but begrudgingly fixed the errors. I would have shut him down for being addict, but wanted to give my manager time to nail him for a straw purchase instead. Looking over his 4473 again, I notice his middle name is spelled Benjamin. I look at his ID, it shows Benjamin. So I ask him how to spell his middle name, and he replies, can't you read, Beach? I say that I can read so well, in fact, that I can see his name is spelled different on his paperwork than his driver's license. He says I don't know, I never use my middle name. Give me my ID, I'll fix it, even though it doesn't matter. At this point, thankfully, my manager comes out. He's a big dude, probably 6 feet 3 inches and 260 or so. He starts asking the guy about the gun, trying to determine whether it's a straw purchase. The guy gets defensive, says this dumb bitch has been trying to tell me she knows better than me since I got here. Now you're interrogating me? I'd been taking his verbal abuse for the last half hour and had enough. So I flung back this from a guy who can't spell his own middle name. My manager gave me this wide-eyed dude, not helping, look and tried to calm the customer down, but it was too late. The guy reached over the counter, like he was going to grab me, and said, "You dumb cunt." He could immediately see that he went way too far from the look on MGR's face. He stopped, turned, and walked out. Manager followed him out the front door and stared him down until he drove out of the parking lot. 1. People saying or wanting several at a time, and after questioning figuring out they were intent on going to the gun show to sell them for way more than purchased for. The common thing was people would buy a $500 to $700 then take it to a gun show and be able to sell it for $1,200 plus. This was during the Obama administration. 2. People not knowing what firearm they want, but being very general. Example, C. I want a 9mm. Me. Okay, any particular brand? C. Doesn't matter. Me. Okay, what price range are you in? C. Man, I don't care. I just need a gun. 3. People trying to buy for a friend, but try to say it's a gift. 4. People lying about their information. I'm sure some of the other gun sellers in here can help, but there's so many little things when it comes to dealing with people in the firearm industry. You learn how to read people, what questions to ask, and how to ask them. It's similar to when cops get a hunch and something ends up not being right. Happy to address any questions, concerns, etc. Thanks for reading. My favorite was Dean. I worked in what state? We could still long guns to residents of a few other states, including AC. This guy comes in, strikes up a convo with our weird, smelly counter guy, fondly referred to as Doggy Fresh Breath, our resident cowboy, action weirdo. They bond over extremely exaggerated, or outright bogus tales of times I bested a grizzly bear, and Doggy Fresh Breath starts paperwork. I was the manager, and already keeping an eye on the sale, because the customer basically asked what is a good gun for hunting, without offering any specifics like what, or where he is hunting. Doggy handed him a rifle, the guy basically looked it up and down, and said he'd take it, didn't ask any questions, shoulder it, or work the bolt at all. Classic straw purchase behavior. The guy fills out his paperwork, and at this point, I'm already sure I'm going to shut the sale down, but I proceed with the paperwork and check, so we have him on file. Doggy calls me over after 4473 is complete and goes up, "Banger, how do I call this in?" When I ask what he means, he points out that the guy only has one name. Dean. I look at his ID and sure enough, it only has the one name on it. I ask if it's his first name or last name, he says yes. I ask if his name is Dean, and he said no, only one Dean. I explained that legally, every person in the US has both a first and last name, and he said not in AC. After trying to explain, futilely, that AC is actually part of the US, I gave in, and told Doggy to call it in. He went in the back to make the call, then called me back, because it didn't work. I took over, and hilarity ensued. Anyone who has ever called Nix can tell you that they aren't allowed to break their script, and you can predict what words come out of their mouth in what order for the entirety of the call. So when you violate the sacred rhythm of the call, things get uncomfortable. Nix operator, last name, me, Dean, D-E-O-N. Nix op, first name, me, no first name. First name, me, he doesn't have a first name. What? That isn't a thing. He needs a first name. Me, I told him that, but he insisted that's his full legal name. No it isn't. He needs a first name. Me, yeah, I thought so. Please cancel the check, I'm going to shut this down. I go back out front, and Dean was gone. He just left. I was livid at Doggy. Our policy was to take the customer's ID to the back when we called in, and he hadn't, so I wasn't able to give it to the cops when he left. Anyway, that's the story of Dean with the fake ID. Guy came in looking pretty ill. His face was bright red, and he was sweating profusely while struggling to breathe. One of my employees was convinced he might be having a heart attack, so he asked if he was okay. This guy went ballistic and cussed him out for bothering him. One of the many insane things he yelled was, "What? You got something against red people?" My employee backed off and let us know that he was unhinged. He walked over to the gun counter and asked to see a revolver. He immediately pointed it at my formerly concerned employee and said, "I wonder if this would be good enough to put a bullet through the head of that nosy son of a bitch." We had already been filled in by our plain clothed loss prevention guy who was now following him around after his outburst. When he made that threat, I didn't bother asking him to put the gun down. We have to assume the worst, so I took it from him. I couldn't risk giving him any chance to load it in case he was concealing ammunition. You never know. He started screaming that he was going to get a gun and kill us all. Our loss prevention didn't take kindly to that and attempted to physically restrain him until the police could arrive. It took 4 of us to hold that big bastard down. Needless to say, he was arrested for terroristic threats and assault. I run my own small shop and I'm thankful to be able to screen my own customers effectively. However, sometimes my license info gets entered automatically into large retailer databases who don't vet their customers and blindly dropship me guns with no notice, dumping the responsibility on me. One case about a year ago, a major retailer I won't name did exactly this and also left out the packing slip by mistake, so I had no idea who the gun was for. I received the box during a particularly busy Friday late in the afternoon and only had time to log the pertinence while I sorted out my existing appointments. I jotted down a note to call the retailer Monday morning since I was leaving first thing 6 AM Saturday for a weekend trip. Monday morning I come home to half a dozen messages on my answering machine, all from a very irate individual yelling incoherently into the phone from a millimeter away demanding I give them their gun. After an hour of analyzing the contents of these voicemails, I pieced together that they had purchased this extremely high quality high-point carbine and expected it to be delivered directly to their door, no questions asked, and involving no ID or background checks. I called the retailer, relayed the contents of the voicemails, got an apology and promptly returned the gun to them on their dime. Then I called and attempted to speak to the would-be buyer, who was impossible to communicate with and belligerent beyond comprehension. I clearly informed them as politely as I could I declined their business, returned the gun to the retailer, and didn't want any future business from them. They uttered some choice words and hung up. But wait, there's more. The next morning, an hour before opening time, this person shows up banging on the door, demanding I give them their gun. Without getting into too much detail, they were asked to leave and only finally hightailed it when the threat of police involvement was raised. Every single thing about this was sketchy as hell, and I'm glad it's the only bad apple I've had in going on 10 years in the biz. I would help out on the weekends doing guns shows or working the store. 2 things I remember that made me go nope. 2 Hispanic guys come in the store and start browsing. Let them look around a bit, then ask if they need any help, so the one starts talking in Spanish to his buddy who is translating. This goes on a minute before I ask who the gun is for. The guy translating says it for him, but my suspicions are pretty high at this point, and he starts asking some more questions. He asked something about whether you can get high cap mags for one of them, so I say I don't know, let me ask the owner. I go in the back and tell the owner what I think is going on, and he comes out, starts talking to them, and asks who the gun is for. The guy translating says it's for his buddy, but he's buying it. Well, obviously that's a no-no, and the owner point that out, and the fact he'd already told me it was for him. That we're told to leave. I was working a gun show, and you have to keep one ear on the person you're dealing with, the other on surrounding conversations, as well as making sure no one tries a snatch and grab. It's stressful at times, to say the least. We mostly deal in new guns and do custom work on them as well, but occasionally we take guns in on consignment. At this particular show we only had one used gun, and it was a pristine King Cobra, but no box, and the guy wanted $1,600 for it. Not happening. So we are getting a lot of interest on the Cobra until we tell them it's a consignment and the seller didn't have the box and docs, and they'll look at it and say they'd give X amount of money, and we'd have to say the seller is firm, and that was it. But along came this one guy, and as bad as it sounds, how you dress and present yourself says a lot. The guy was a younger black guy, probably in his 20s, which isn't anything to draw flags until you take in the sagging pants, multiple red bandanas, tats, and excessively baggy clothing. Not saying he wasn't a gangbanger, but being in Atlanta I won't say he wasn't either. But he starts asking about the Cobra because he heard me telling the previous guy it was used. Wanted to know if we had more used guns and if they required background checks. For starters, I have nothing against wanting a used gun. They're cheaper and a lot of the time you can find guns, if better quality, than what you can buy new in a similar price range. But if you start asking if it requires a background check, nah, keep walking. Anything that goes through a dealer will require a background check. It isn't worth risking your business over not doing it. Of course, you always have to keep an eye out for people that smell of alcohol, weed, etc. are excessively impatient or move a ton. You pick up a lot of cues from behavior alone most of the time. And to prevent people from taking it the wrong way, I have nothing against weed. In fact, I'd love for it to be legalized and regulated like alcohol and tobacco, just to remove the stigma from it. What I have issues with is guns, and any kind of drug do not mix. Period. If you're going out to a buddy's property to shotguns, drink, maybe pass a joint around, do so after you've set guns and they are safely put up. Too many accidents happen because of poor/impaired decision making abilities. I just want to say thanks to I've Got a Blue Panda idea for posting this question. I'm enjoying reading the comments and answering questions. The stuff you read and conversations in this question thread are often an every week, if not every day occurrence for most big box/gun shop employees. Yes, even the crazy stories. And for every one there are at least 10 others which would make even the harshest critics say, wow, yeah, glad you were able to help them out. No matter what side of the fence you are on, I hope everyone gets to see some of what we experience, the rules, which we have to know, follow, and be able to communicate understandably, and what all goes into purchasing a firearm. I can't speak for everyone, but in my personal experience in gun sales, you have to walk a fine line between running a business and selling firearms. We do have to tell people we can't sell them this product, but we have to do so in a way which doesn't lose their business completely. Do we make good calls? Yes. Do we make bad calls? Yes. Thanks again for reading, and I'm happy to address any questions, concerns, complaints, or feedback. A guy showed up to pick up a gun without the proper proof of residency. I told him I couldn't release his gun, even though he'd waited the proper 10-day waiting period because of this. He started threatening me because he was missing his daughter's birthday for this. Goddamn parent of the year. Anyways, he started yelling and trying to grab both me and the firearm. Manager phoned the police. The man tried to come behind the counter and was shouting at the operator that he didn't consent to us calling the police because his voice was being illegally recorded. He cornered me behind the counter, at which point I drew my own gun and he started screaming to the operator that I was in fact threatening him with a gun. I've never seen cop cars move so fast. They were on site in 90 seconds. Anyways, gun stores are a pretty tight community, so after the police escorted him off the property, I cancelled the entire sale, and we sent the man's info to the local gun stores with a story of the incident. He showed up the next day to try to pick up the gun with the proper paperwork this time, and got livid when we informed him we cancelled the sale. We gently reminded him that the police said if they ever had to show up again, he was leaving in handcuffs, and he promptly left 3 other gun stores called that day to tell us he attempted to buy a gun there that day and spent his time in the store talking badly about our store. Anyways, a couple much less exciting times I also denied sales. One kid showed up with a medicinal marijuana cards. Sorry kid, bye. Another guy brought a piece of mail from the state as proof of residence. Turns out this particular piece of mail was informing him of a warrant for his arrest as a result of failure to appear in court. Yeah, how about you don't get a gun? Owner and operator of a internet sales oriented firearms business, but I do sale in person / do FBCs for other FFLS in the area. I don't have any guidelines as to what I look for, aside from the federally mandated rules. I do, however, have gut feelings that will push me to deny a sale. If a customer comes in with bruises on their hands, I will deny a sale regardless if they pass a FBC. Bruises like this are generally caused by physical violence, which is something I look for. Another sign is if they come in distraught, acting weary or nervous. Again, even if they pass the FBC, I will deny a sale to them in most cases. Same goes for any physical or emotional signs of mental impairment. Had a man come in around 6 months ago looking to buy one of my rifles. He passed the FBC, no issues. Had a gut feeling that I should deny the sale, and did so. 3 days later he was charged with domestic assault for beating his girlfriend to a pulp. I might have saved her life by denying the sale. There are other typical things, such as outwardly signs of drug or alcoholism. As an FFL, I have the right to deny service to anyone for any reason, and I try to be as fair as humanly possible. Will there be some that fall through the crack? Yes. Will I feel responsible? Probably. Am I at fault if they pass the federal background check then commit a crime with my firearm? No. I work for an FFL. There have been many great examples given from other folks. One thing that commonly gets misrepresented is how gun dealers will bend rules and want anyone and everyone to buy their guns and will do anything for a sale. This simply isn't true. If a dealer screws something up, they not only are risking their license and business, but actual jail time. I work in a shop, and if something fishy happens, we call the other shops and tell them to be on the lookout. This is after we try to get as much info about them as possible. We card everyone as they come in, check IDs when they want to look at guns, etc. If we get a weird feeling, we will sometimes just ask to see their ID again and make a photocopy right in front of them. Other shops call us sometimes to tip us off as well. We all have families and friends out there. We don't want anything to happen to them. I don't want a gun I sell to kill an innocent person. No one does. I want the guns I sell to be used for fun, target shooting, school trap teams, collecting, and God forbid, self-defense. Thankfully, the vast majority of sales we deny are due to blatant straw sales or the person smelling like marijuana. Both are extremely common in my neck of the woods. Normally 5 or so a week of each instance. Sometimes we have to kick 10 people out a day for smelling like the backstage of a Snoop Dogg concert. I'm a new FFL holder and have denied 3 purchases so far. One was an obvious straw purchase. First guy asks a bunch of questions, finds what he wants, then when time to fill out paperwork, second guy walks up. No sale. They weren't too happy, but oh well. Second guy was just odd, couldn't get a read on him. Asked about assault rifles, then sniper rifles. Then when he didn't have the money for that, he inquired about a used shotgun I had. He asks me how deadly it was and what it could be used for. I asked him a few questions to get a read on him. Thought he was kinda sketchy, but he had a kid with him and seemed out together well enough. I politely told him that maybe he wasn't really in a position to buy yet. Maybe he should do a bit of research and find what he was looking for before parting with any money. I told him that firearm ownership was a big responsibility, and if you don't really know what you're getting into, nor what you want, maybe you should hold off. Seemed nice enough about it once all said and done. He came back to me at a gun show a couple of months later. I didn't remember him. Found out later that my wife did. He filled out his 4473 and I got back a delayed response. I politely told him it was delayed, but we treat that as a denial. Well within our rights to do that. Don't know if he went somewhere else, but we didn't sell to him. Third person was a young guy who wouldn't stop talking about how his boys were gonna be so jelly. When he pulls this out on the block, got a bad feeling about him. Maybe it was his attitude, maybe it was how he carried himself. He was by no means some badass, but he really wanted to be. I don't want to give a gun to someone like that. I worked at a field and stream store in my late teens. We complied with the various laws and had quite a few store rules that we enforced as if they were laws. For example, if you wanted to hold any firearm from a display or behind the counter, we hold your ID. I imagine that our reasons for denying sales are pretty boring and straightforward, but here goes. Straw purchases, by far the most common. Basically, someone comes in and looks at guns and another person with them tries to fill out paperwork. Sometimes someone would come in and really want a gun, then a few days later someone else would come in and specifically ask for that gun. If they couldn't answer questions about why they want that gun specifically, sale denied and blacklisted from all F&S nationwide. In most cases, we would also file police reports. You could tell when someone would constantly be on their cell phone or making multiple trips to the parking lot. The first thing out of their mouth is that they want a gun that day, the cheapest gun in the store regardless of brand/caliber. Super sketchy. We would ask them to leave. If they gave us an ID, we would file a police report. Many of these types would not give us ID. Answering the standard "Why do you want this firearm?" question incorrectly. If you say you want a 9mm pistol or rimfire rifle for hunting, that is a no sale and possibly an ejection depending on how you react. Incorrectly filling out paperwork. I can forgive misreading county for country on a 4473 form, but misspelling your name, street, or incorrectly writing your dog was an instant deny and blacklist. My best friend also worked there, and he had a guy answer yes to "Have you ever been convicted of a felony?" The police arrived before he left the store, and he was arrested. Intoxicated people. This also includes people with obvious sores on their face or track marks on their arms or hands. Generally sketchy people, people with obvious gang affiliations, or people that ask about lethality in a sketchy way. If they asking about a home defense weapon and ask the right questions, like ground penetration and noise, then I can understand. Asking about lethality alone is sketchy. Any weird behavior was treated with your best judgment. For example, someone being unsafe with where their gun is pointed would probably just be asked to leave, whereas someone that even jokes about homicide or suicide would be ejected, blacklisted, and reported to the police. Generally being aggressive, this probably falls under sketchy people, but some people came in, and it was obvious they had some sort of unresolved anger. This was handled case by case, but I did ask several people to leave. Thankfully, none of them escalated the situation. All in all, it was a good experience working there. I learned a lot and met some really cool people. I worked for a small family-owned gun store and range. Straw purchases was the main reason for us. One of the more obvious straw purchases was the wife or girlfriend coming in with their boyfriend/husband and having the guy sit there and tell her to tell us what they wanted. It would happen right in front of us. We would typically ask for his firearm card, Illinois, and they never had one. We would nope the fuck out of that real quick. The margins on firearms aren't great. Glocks were usually about $50-75 tops. So it wasn't worth the sale to have the feds knocking on our door. My favorite was when they'd straight up tell us they were buying it for someone else. Even as gifts you legally can't do that, and at least for us, we always had the policy of if we know we can't, we always offered them the option of a gift certificate for the purchase price, and then run it like that. Local gun stores would also email the driver's license and gun card of suspected straw purchasers. Otherwise, unless the person was acting really strange, usually an ex denial or a problem with the 4473 questions, we rarely needed to deny a sale. Lots of people got the boot from the range though. If only we made everyone shoot before we sold them a gun. I worked in retail selling firearms in California for 4 years. Yes, the paperwork for gun sales in this state will give you carpal tunnel. I had a great customer who would come in with his wife and son to talk guns and such and pick up range gear. After about a year of knowing the guy, he came in looking a bit shook up, shopping for a new shotgun with his wife. Turns out there was an intruder in his home while they were sleeping, a 19-year-old man, and he shot the intruder dead. He said the police didn't even arrest him because it was clearly self-defense. I sold him a shotgun outfitted to be comfortable for either him or his wife in the event they have a repeat of bad luck. I called it a peace of mind sale. Over the course of the next 18 months the guy changed drastically. First he started retelling how he shot an intruder to anyone and everyone, then stopped bringing his family in with him, then started coming in for ammo and going to the range more frequently until it became a daily thing. Then he started going hunting for coyotes and talking about the field dressing in more detail than some of our customers were comfortable with. He lost all his excess weight and there wasn't much there before. His wife left him and wouldn't let him see his son anymore. He said she was insisting he seems therapist. He seemed to be hunting every day at this point, and I pointed out he might be trying to normalize the act of killing in an attempt to cope with having killed that boy. He got quiet and nodded to himself, but then left kinda quickly. He came in a couple weeks later and wanted to buy some 12 gauge rounds similar to the broadhead Hexalit 32. They're a slug with twisted blades that break off upon impact and crisscross through the target, bouncing around and making a real mess of things. I asked how him and his family were. He said that he wouldn't know. I pointed out that the only shotgun he had was at his wife's house. He just stared at me and I took in the sight of this guy. He used to look like a Ken doll businessman, but at that point he looked wild in the eyes, like he had gone rabid. I told him I wasn't going to sell him anything gun related for a while. I told him I think his wife was right and he needs some professional guidance. And I said, if he wants to buy anything at our store he'll have to get that guidance, or take up fishing. His eyes welled up with tears and he left. I'm not sure if he was going to do what I was suspecting, and I never got the chance to find out how everything turned out for him because he never came back. Looking back, I wish I had handled it a bit more diplomatically and that I had the know-how to help him work through his emotions. We may have been the only people he was actually talking to about this, and it sucks that I didn't find a way to make better use of that and help him through what he was clearly going through. Edit. Spelling. Late to the party. I'm an FFL dealer that does mostly dealer to dealer transfers all over the country. Every now and then I get a phone call from a denied transferee who wants my company to intervene. We stay polite and firm and defer to the receiving FFL. In reality, I wouldn't intervene with an FFL dealer's decision any more than I would intervene with NEX, the National Instant Check System. I once received a call from a gentleman who explained to me that he was having trouble picking up a handgun for his son. Understood. Handgun transfers have a few more rules than long gun, shotgun and rifle transfers, and very rarely the transferring dealer is misinformed on the rules or state regs. If this is the case, I'll ask the dealer to at least consider the transfer, but it's a soft sell and not one that I'm going to press. So, I'm talking to this guy and he's telling me that his son went in to pick up a handgun and the dealer said he couldn't transfer it to him. He never mentioned a 4473, and I presumed that the son was between 18 and 20, an age range where it is legal to outright own a long gun, but illegal to outright own a handgun. However, it is legal for a parent to have possession of the gun and give it to their kid. The kid just can't travel solo with a handgun in his possession. In a situation like this, it's quite understandable if the kid got turned away, and some, very few, dealers have a no questions asked policy where, if someone is denied for any reason, no other person can pick up the gun. While on the outside edge of probability, it's a scenario that could definitely play out this way. Dad goes on to say that he went to the dealer to pick it up for his son and the dealer denied him as well, and he wanted to know what we were going to do to remedy the situation. I talked to the man a little more and listened to what he was saying, and it all of a sudden clicked that something really wasn't right. Sir, how old is your son? He's 37. Takes a few seconds to figure out what the fuck to say or do, because this is ridiculous. Okay, then it sounds like he was denied the transfer by NICS, not the gun dealer specifically. We can't do anything to override something like that. The problem is my boy had this real beach of an ex-wife, and it turns out this man's 37-year-old boy caught a domestic violence conviction, which disqualified him from owning a firearm ever, and rightfully so. Fuck that whole dysfunctional situation. I can't imagine how something like that could happen to someone so supported by his dad's. Worked selling guns for over a year, and it was pretty easy to see who would get denied. Straw purchases were always the biggest problem though. There is a lot of grey areas when it comes to gifting guns, and this is completely up to the person behind the counter to interpret the intention of the sale. I had many people say they were gifting the gun to a significant other, and if I believed that this was the true intent and I believe that person is legally able to have a firearm, I'm okay with proceeding with the transaction. A few times though I had someone do a background check and get delayed and then try to have their significant other attempt to purchase the same type of firearm or similar. I would straight out deny that purchase. My favorites were the couples that would look around and hold guns, and when it came time to purchase said gun, one of them would walk off during the background check and disappear. That was a big red flag and we would outright deny that sale. Some people would argue, but ultimately if I don't feel that the transaction is 100% legitimate, that gun was not getting sold. It is definitely not hard to get a feel of people's intentions when it came to buying guns. As with anything else, it is largely up to their actions. If they are alone and glued to their phone or asking someone questions that would be considered pretty common knowledge, those are pretty big red flags as well. Now if little Lisa, who weighs 100 pounds soaking wet, came in asking questions and attempting to buy say a specific .357 and obviously is talking with someone, that's a big nope. But if she comes in and is seriously interested in learning about or looking for something for self-protection and is looking for something smaller for carrying, that does not seem to be a straw purchase. It is hard to tell sometimes, but with anything in life, you start to get a feel for your customers and their true intentions. It is really 100% body language to me. Communication is also key. Making sure all your sales staff and employees know if a specific person is attempting to purchase a gun, so they can't come back another day and attempt to talk to someone else. Probably late to the show, but I'm probably a gun seller's bad story. So I was 18 and living across the street from a homeless shelter in a loft with one other roommate. I'm a small female, and my roommate was a not small male who slept with earplugs in on the opposite side of the loft. My bedroom was at the top of the stairs that led down to the front door. I'm naturally a little paranoid, but after a night where someone drunk tried to get into our home, probably trying to get into the place beneath us, it was a dispensary, and my roomie slept through it peacefully, I decided to purchase a small handgun to keep near my bed. I read the laws, and my state law said I could do a private sale and have it sent to a gun shop nearby after getting a permit to own from my local PD. Did the thing. Ended up buying this sweet revolver that looked like it came from a western, go big or go home, and went to pick up gun when notified it was at the dealer. In a ho I get there, and I'm filling out the paperwork, and as I turn it in, and I'm just about to get my gun and go home, he sees my birth date. Got totally uncomfortable, and was like, "You can't own a gun." And I was like, "No, I just can't carry." I even asked the police department when I got the permit. Guy was like, "No way." Googled a ton of shit. Couldn't find anything saying I couldn't. Called the police department, who also said I could. Wanted to talk to the guy who signed the permit. Guy was out. Called the police again. Different person said I couldn't. Now guy's just confused. Sale was non-refundable. In a ho. He said he had to protect his shop, and he understood my intention was just to protect myself, but wouldn't sell it to me. He felt bad, so apparently I unknowingly purchased a collector's item they don't see very often. Gave me $200 for the trouble and kept the gun. Got a 150-pound dog instead. I worked for a popular sporting goods / outdoor store several years ago. I worked gun counter and was also the manager of the archery department. One night while acting manager on duty, I was called to go over some owns 4473. As I approached the counter, the man attempting to purchase the firearm said to my male salesman, "You had to call a woman from cleaning over here to check something. You don't have any balls to make decisions on your own." First of all, insulting the person selling you a firearm isn't very smart, and second of all, talking poorly to the manager isn't going to work in your favor. With the smartest response, I explained that I'm the manager and I just need to verify the paperwork so the sale can continue, and that if he wishes to proceed then he should rethink his attitude. He laughed. I didn't. I look over the 4473 and notice a misspelling of his street name, and his zip code wasn't valid. We ask a few more questions about his intentions and what he does for a living. He then slips up and says he can't find a job because of his record, and immediately tries to backpedal, saying how it's a small town and everyone knows he's a piece of shit. I literally rolled my eyes in his face and kept his ID copy and called the local police while he continued to yell and whine about not having rights, how a woman can't tell him what he can and can't do, and how he could outshoot me any day. He was promptly escorted by security to the back office and held until the police arrived. One other favorite was as I was processing paperwork for a man to purchase a Glock, I got a call over my radio that there was a gun in holster left in the men's fitting room on the bench. I explained the customer that I would return shortly but had to handle something. I stood just outside the fitting room the gun was in and called law enforcement per our policy. In the meantime asked another associate to let me customer know that I would be a little while when all of a sudden I see him walking towards me with his eyes wide. He had left his current concealed carry in the fitting room. I didn't even have to explain why I couldn't sell him the Glock. He apologized over and over again and said he was new to this whole thing. The police arrived and handled the rest. Late to the game here, I was at the zoo with the family. I managed a gun range with a full retail shop for 2 years. We turned away more people than you could possibly imagine, and my guys had full authority to turn down anyone they would like. Out of all the people I turned down, I still remember one gentleman. He started by mentioning how bad of a day he was having and that he just wanted to get a rental gun to blow off some rounds. He was fidgety, looked depressed, and seemed determined. I was a combat stress and suicide counselor in the Marines. I'm 100% sure had I rented him a firearm I would have been cleaning up his blood that night. After being denied, he then tried to buy a gun. I already had his information from his ID, so I put him in the system as banned from ever purchasing anything from our store. Another time, we had someone's brother call us and say that his brother was coming in to get a gun so that he could kill himself. As soon as he showed up, I politely explained that we could not sell or rent him a firearm. He is also in our system for life. Additionally, people always want to knock the background check system, but it is actually pretty good. I've heard people be denied purchase because of a misdemeanor battery charge 20 years prior. If you know someone is suicidal or in poor mental health, please call your local gun shop and let them know. It could save their life and countless others. Owner of a home-based dealership. Every firearm we sell requires a background check. Every last one. The amount of times people have asked if I can keep one off the books or be absolutely shocked that buying a firearm requires a background check makes me sick. Annoying, but they end up filling out the form and passing anyway. Had one guy come look at a used handgun once, brought his mom with him. He looked it over, then handed it to this little 70-year-old lady. Could tell instantly she had never held a gun before. Looked alarmed. He said she will take it and proceeded to say she would be doing the paperwork on it. Nope, she's not. Man got instantly angry, yelling and poking my in the chest. Remember, this is in my home. Told him I had reason to believe that she was buying this firearm for him and that he was a restricted person. So I cannot proceed with the sale under risk of putting a firearm into the hands of someone that shouldn't have one. He stormed out and his mom apologized. The handgun was a .44 Magnum Desert Eagle. I worked at a sporting goods store a few years ago, and a woman came in and picked a handgun to buy. The gun department manager was showing her the ammo to go in it. He asked her what she was going to shoot with it, and she said deer. He made a comment about how you don't shoot deer with a handgun, so she said, oh, well, maybe I'll just do target practice. After she got the ammo for it, they told her she had to wait 3 days. She changed her mind and got some sort of shotgun instead and walked out that day. At the counter, while doing the background check, she picked up the stapler and was closing it above her hand so that after each click a staple would fall into her hand. Just weird and distant. And she was staring up at the lights apparently. The next day the police came in to talk to my manager. My brother-in-law, who was a police officer, found her that night in her car in a parking lot for a local park. She pulled the trigger with her toe. The manager felt awful. Big burly man sobbing in front of me. He had had a rough night and day before work with one of his kids, special needs, and he knew something was weird about that lady, but just assumed she was a non-harmful weirdo. A few months later he quit after years of managing the gun department and successfully saving people from suicides a few times by calling in weird behavior. He felt so guilty that he couldn't bear to sell guns anymore. I was at the store when it happened, checked the woman out as I was a cashier, but my friend and the manager were the ones who were dealing with her background check and the rest. They were telling me how weird she was and laughing at her wanting to shoot deer with a handgun after she left. Wasn't until later that he started crying and such. Edited to add that my brother-in-law told me later that our store was the third place she had gone that day to get a gun. She had gone to 2 pawn shops first, but they told her the 3-day rule, so they assumed that she attempted our store thinking that it was just a pawn shop rule. I think it helped my manager to know that she had already decided what she was going to do and that she would have found a way no matter what. But still, he couldn't deal with selling guns after that. TLDR manager sold a gun to woman who was strange. My cop brother-in-law found her dead later that night from suicide. Manager felt like shit and eventually quit. My father is total besties with an old neighbor of ours who was in the Secret Service during Reagan and Bush senior administrations. He and my pops are avid collectors and have concealed carry licenses even though my state is incredibly strict on any type of open or concealed carry. Went to a gun shop with him and his bestie once. For background, I'm a med student, hope to do psychiatry. Had a patient come into our office because he was hospitalized 20 or 30 years ago and wanted to buy a gun. Now in present day, obviously, one-time hospitalization when he was 17 cause his mom was painfully strict and had him committed. Story does indeed check out. He did tactical target shooting as a hobby. My day is incredibly slow, so I spent a long time with this man. He was super knowledgeable and I learned a lot from him. So, I thought I was prepared to go into this gun store. I was not. Pops and his bestie walk away to look at something else, and I get approached by an employee and I immediately start shooting bricks. I thought 7 years in training for psychiatry, I have about 3 to 4 more years to go, that I was going to be prepared, but this man grilled me harder than I have ever been grilled, or taught to question and assess others. I got the sweats and everything, totally froze. I didn't even buy anything. It was just that intimidating. They do not fuck around. Gun shows, however, are a total different story. Had a guy interested in a Glock 19, his first gun. 2 of us at the counter. My coworker turns around to stock ammo. Next thing I know, the guy is checking it out and lifts it in an obvious attempt to aim it at my coworker's head. Instant disarm and kicked him out. Told him to never come back. Had another couple come in, totally drugged out tweakers. Chick is playing dumb looking through other stuff at the store, while boyfriend is looking at guns. Boyfriend wants to buy gun, but says his girlfriend is buying it for him as a gift and wants her to run the background, because he's bought too many guns, and doesn't want to red flag the authorities. Mind you, this chick has been nervous as shit for the last 20 minutes, dropping shit off shelves, scratching her arms, and wearing a hoodie in 95-degree weather. I told him fine, she can pay for it, but you're both getting an X check. I knew this was a straw purchase about an hour ago. 3 seconds after they walk in the door, I was just trying to get more info on them. Chick throws a huge fit along with the boyfriend and threatens to write us a bad review in the town news because she's a reporter there. I told her, honey, I'd give you $100 in cash right now if you could write out your own name, much less a complaint on us, and promptly kicked them out. Now our store is frequented by law enforcement as we supply them with uniforms and gear. They were followed out if the store, and, I assume, followed up on later. I have told this story many times. I was living in Bismarck, North Dakota. At this time there was protests for a pipeline known as DAPL, Dakota Access Pipeline. Many people may have heard of these protests, which were really riots done by eco-terrorists. I have many horrific stories of these events. The media only showed the side of the story they wanted, and this caused national attention positively for these literal terrorists. Anyway, at the time I was the assistant store manager in charge of hardlines, or pretty much all of general merchandise, non-consumables like food. This included sporting goods, all firearms and ammunition. I sold many firearms while with the company I was salaried with. On this day, some members wearing their aim patches were in the store at sporting goods. Now this isn't enough to deny a sale. I'm all for profits in my area. My department manager had called me over to sign off on a sale. These guys were buying a Ruger Mini 14, ammo, and what made me refuse their entire sale, a spotlight. Now there was tons of murdered livestock, farm equipment destroyed, fire set, and many other horrible things happening to innocent locals because of the protests. There were points where the city would lock down all schools because these people are literally rioting at the Capitol or blocking roads and bridges, all without proper licensing. My employees would have to leave to get their kids from a school nearby that might be unsafe. Back to the point. Buying a faking spotlight, rifle and ammo means you are up to some shady shit and need to get the fuck out of my store. Not my story, but my uncle owns a gun shop back in St. Louis. One day an elderly woman came in asking to purchase a gun. She knew specifics about caliber, types, etc., so he didn't get any major red flags and figured she already owned a gun. Still, trying to do his due diligence, he walked her through some basic questions before the sale. The convo went like this. Uncle, so why do you want another gun? Lady, well, it's New Year's. Uncle, so, is it a gift? Lady, no, there are just more people coming this year. Uncle, I don't follow. Lady, you know, on New Year's you point them in the air and shoot and celebrate. It's a tradition. Uncle, ma'am, you do understand, when you shoot straight up the bullets have to come back down. Lady, OHH. Uncle, people can be killed that way, so obviously I won't be selling you anything ever. This idiot thought the bullets keep flying into space or something. Now I'm just thinking about how many other people observe the same tradition in her part of the city, which is somewhat densely populated. Edit. Seems to be some confusion. I entered all my data for the form 4473. That's a federal thing and I don't mind it. I did not want to give out my phone number at the checkout register, as I had already gotten the full go-ahead from the federal check system. This was not data they needed for my firearm sale. It was part of their point of sale system that they require for every purchase. I might be some own story, I guess. Went to Dick's to buy a cheaper's rifle at some point. Fill out the 4473 just fine. Had to argue about the website listing it $20 cheaper, but they finally checked. At the actual checkout though, what's your phone number? Why? I don't give it out, and I've already filled out the 4473 and gotta proceed. You shouldn't need it. I can't proceed without a phone number, sir. Why? We don't use it or send it out. I just need it to check you out, okay? I understand that, but I'm not comfortable giving out my phone number. I can just go get it off the 4473. Sure, whatever. I'll just avoid shopping there, I guess. People just seem to flip their shit when you say no to giving them a phone/address. You literally have no reason in the world to need it, and I sure as fact don't want your shit emailers or calls.